Welcome to Edison TV. My name is Vivienne Parry, and in this edition, we're going to be looking at the work of SIGA Technologies. Now, SIGA is a very particular company because it manufactures products that the whole world hopes will never be used. Medical countermeasures against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. And with me is their CEO, Dr. Phil Gomez. Phil, hello.
Good morning, Vivienne. Nice to talk to you.
Now, your lead program, we've said we hope we never need to use these things. Your lead program is actually for a disease that doesn't even exist anymore, smallpox. And I wondered if we could start out by playing a bit of a game of tag here on smallpox. Well, if I start by saying that smallpox, vaccination for smallpox ended, and anybody under the age of, I guess, 50 will not have had a smallpox vaccine. It was eliminated, I think the last case was in 1977. It's a very, very infectious disease, much more infectious than coronavirus. It's much more deadly than coronavirus, I think about a 30% mortality. And of course, everyone will know that it has this, even if you survive, you have this terrible scarring, particularly on the face. So it really is a dread disease. And it was the subject of an extraordinary eradication campaign led by a great hero of mine, D.A. Henderson, who's the kind of John Wayne of the vaccination world, I think. But if this disease no longer exists, and I think I said the last case, I think it was 1977 in somewhere like Ethiopia, why on earth are we needing any kind of medicines against a disease that doesn't exist in the world?
So Vivienne, thank you. That's a great summary of the lethality of smallpox and the challenges historically that we had. There were over 300 million people that died in the last century, and it's only thanks to heroes like D.A. Henderson, whom I had the pleasure of meeting and had great respect for, that a vaccination campaign was able to eliminate it. The reality, however, is that new tools have made it possible to recreate smallpox. So, as you may know, at the end of the eradication, both the former Soviet Union and the US maintained stockpiles of the virus to continue to work on vaccines and therapeutics, but the agreement was someday those would be destroyed. Unfortunately, or fortunately, science has now shown, and in fact, a group in Canada several years ago published the recreation of something called horsepox, which is a cousin of smallpox. For a little over $100,000, they were able to get primers and recreate the virus in vitro. And so, especially at the turn of 2001 in the US, with concerns about terrorism and bioterrorism and asymmetric warfare, there became a concern that smallpox would unfortunately be a very deadly weapon or terrorist agent. Bill Gates has talked about this. If someone released it, it would potentially kill billions, precisely because, as you alluded to, we do not immunize it for any longer. I'm a little north of 50 years old, but when I was a child, I had eczema, and that was contraindicated for the vaccine. So even some of us that are older, in fact, aren't protected, and most of us that would have been vaccinated have lost immunity over this long period of time.
Yes, I've been vaccinated, but it was a very long time ago. So it's, you know, we just simply don't do it anymore. And it's not just that you can, re-engineer smallpox, is that there are little stocks of smallpox around the world that people don't really realize there. Even the NIH found some in a freezer, I think.
That's correct. There was some found a number of years ago that people had kind of lost track of. So there's probably accidental stockpiles. There may be virus in permafrost that were from victims, hundreds of years ago. There and certainly could be purposeful stocks that are undisclosed in countries that may want to do harm.
So tell me about your lead program, TPOXX, and how it was developed.
Sure. So it's an amazing feat. Our R&D group, in collaboration with many people in the U.S. government, did to develop a antiviral treatment, an oral pill for a disease that doesn't exist. So essentially, our R&D team worked with, in the U.S., the NIH, the Department of Defense, and an agency called BARDA to evaluate efficacy in surrogate models. So we used monkeypox in non-human primates as a way to test efficacy. We used rabbit pox in rabbits and a whole host of other what are called orthopoxviruses, the family of viruses that smallpox is a member of. And we looked at the ability to treat disease that mimicked the disease progression in humans. And so that was done over a number of years. And then we had to bridge that to human trials. So we did trials in healthy humans, looked at both safety of our drug. We had no serious drug-related adverse events, as well as the pharmacokinetics. So we could say, what did it take to protect an animal from the orthopox virus, and what would it take to have enough drug on board in humans to protect? And I'm very proud to say our group published those results in the New England Journal of Medicine. The US FDA actually published their regulatory review because it was quite a novel review of a surrogate virus and a surrogate model for efficacy. So really a great accomplishment and victory of science in developing, again, a treatment where there was none for centuries.
Now explain to me something, because you can what's called ring vaccinate. So if you have an outbreak, you can go and quickly vaccinate, everybody in a town, for instance, to protect them. And I know that there are smallpox vaccines which are held. So why would people not use a smallpox vaccine rather than this medicine?
So absolutely both would be used, and it's very important that both tools be available. One of the characteristics of smallpox infection makes it challenging to ultimately do ring vaccination in a rapid way. So there's been many models published on this, but essentially when you're infected with the smallpox virus, you're asymptomatic for 14 days. The virus is replicating, and then at 14 days, you start to get a nondescript fever, and then you develop the telltale rash. Once you develop the rash, you would probably present in emergency room. And as you pointed out at the beginning, you would be quite infectious at that point. And it probably would take a while to be able to determine what in fact you're infected with, because smallpox is not something the average emergency room physician is certainly looking for. So if you look at modeling, ring vaccination will ultimately control an outbreak. But in an era when people get on planes and go around the world, there have been exercises done by University of New South Wales and Australia, publications by the University of Pennsylvania, that have shown that ring vaccination would take quite a while. And in fact, even with a fairly rapid response, a reasonable size outbreak in a city like New York could kill almost 1 million people before you finally got things under control with ring vaccination. I'd also say, D.A. Henderson was supremely confident of ring vaccination. I've been in vaccines a long time, and I am also very much in favor of them. But the realities of the COVID outbreaks have shown us vaccine hesitancy. People being concerned about a vaccine has increased, and ring vaccination depends on herd immunity and depends on the ability to have everyone take the vaccine. So I think more than ever, it's important to have multiple tools at our disposal from a public health standpoint to make sure we not only bring an outbreak under control, but each person has an opportunity to not succumb to the 30% fatality rate.
And actually what we've also seen with COVID is that you need a very considerable infrastructure in order to be able to give mass vaccinations. And you've only got a limited window of time in a smallpox outbreak, and it's much quicker to give people tablets than it is to try and set up your vaccines.
Absolutely. And in fact, we have so currently our FDA approval is for treatment of smallpox disease, but in our advisory committee, which is the group that FDA brings together to talk about the approval of the drug, we got a unanimous vote to approve our drug for treatment of smallpox, but most of the debate was about the fact that our drug could also work prophylactically. And if there's an outbreak, and as you point out, the healthcare system is so overwhelmed, you want a single touch point. So really our vision for the response would be to give people the tablets or the capsules that we have and immunize them. And that way, if they had been infected with smallpox a week or two ago, the tablets will treat the virus and the vaccine will provide a long-term immunity. And so we actually have a contract with the US Department of Defense for $26 million to do the essentially the interference and safety studies to prove that it will work prophylactically, because that would be really the ultimate powerful tool in a smallpox outbreak, to be able to do single touch and be able to really treat and save the population.
Now, I'm guessing that people are taking a lot more notice of your work now than they did a year ago, because COVID has so focused our minds on biological threat and emerging infectious disease. How has that affected your business?
So it absolutely has brought the focus to what are very unlikely but very high consequence events. And those are historically hard things for public policymakers, government funding decisions to be made against those. And so this area has certainly in the US garnered funding, but even smallpox vaccine that has been around for a long time is not stockpiled globally. Most governments don't have the vaccine. So COVID has certainly brought home, I think, the economic impact. I think everyone always assumed there would be a health impact, but the reality is the trillions and trillions of dollars of economic impact have really illustrated that that having a lack of preparedness for something like a coronavirus outbreak or a smallpox outbreak is really critical. And it shined a light on public health infrastructure, but I think it also importantly has shined a light on having these countermeasures, vaccines, diagnostics, drugs, treatments ready to go so that we don't allow a pandemic to spiral out of control before we're able to put it back in the bottle.
Yeah, we were caught with our pants down in many different areas, that's for sure, in virtually every country, whether it was, PPE or all sorts of things that we simply didn't have. And I guess actually it's also made the global nature of this threat much, much more apparent, and the need to be able to have short supply chains. Because, what we saw with PPE, well, of course, it was all made in China and we couldn't get any in any country other than China. So that's really focused minds. So does that have an impact in terms of your global reach?
So it does. I think there's a couple components. For us, this is a drug we hope doesn't get used, and there is no substitute for actually having active stockpiles. So the US government has 1.7 million courses. We delivered that starting in 2013, and we're re-delivering it. It has a 7-year shelf life, and we're re-delivering it. So they have a stockpile. We work very carefully in the US to have a US-based supply chain. So unlike many products, as you can imagine, we have elevated security for our product, and it was important to us to have a program that allowed us to control it within the borders. We also have a partnership with Biomedical Technologies, which is a Pfizer company, to sell this product to governments around the world. And we're very pleased with our progress. Last year, we have it over 45 million in sales to the Canadian government. They recognized that they needed a stockpile not only for their civilian population, but their military as well. And so we've started deliveries to them last year. And I must say, I admire the policymakers in Canada and the people working there, because they did that during a COVID pandemic. The reality for us on that business is most of our customers, the people we would talk to internationally, are focused on COVID. And so we've certainly seen delays in entering in contracts internationally, but overall, I think it certainly elevated the importance of this area and making sure that there is product available. I also want to just go back and touch on the story of COVID-19, because before I was CEO at SIGA, I worked at the NIH and worked on a number of vaccines, including collaborating on the team that made the first SARS vaccine. And I think what SARS taught us is that a class of viruses can continue to be a threat. We had SARS, we had Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS virus that came back. And if you talk to the experts, and certainly the WHO thought a coronavirus could be a problem in the future and could be the source of a pandemic. And we've certainly learned that with COVID-19. Had we focused on coronavirus therapeutics and broad vaccines back when the first kind of incident happened, we might have been much more prepared. The nice thing about our drug, TPOXX, we filed with the European Union this last year, and we've actually filed for an indication of not only smallpox, but something called monkeypox, cowpox, and vaccinia, which is the virus used in the smallpox vaccine. And the reason that's important is that since we stopped those immunizations that we talked about, unfortunately, monkeypox, which is a similar virus, has become much more prevalent in Central Africa. In fact, cases have shown up in London, they've shown up in Israel and Singapore. Fortunately, it has a lower mortality rate of about 10%. But as we've learned with COVID-19, orthopox is a similar class of viruses that could evolve, change, and create the next outbreak. And so it's important to have drugs that treat these classes of viruses that we worry about broadly. So it's something we've filed in the European Union. We've actually filed in Health Canada for that broad indication, and ultimately we'll circle back with FDA to broaden our indication.
What's the forward pipeline looking like?
Yeah, so for us, we're focused on post-exposure prophylaxis with our drug. We actually have collaborations in oncology. Oncology companies are looking at vaccinia as a way to deliver a cancer treatment, but that vaccinia virus is an orthopox virus. It can get out of control, and so having a treatment available to rescue or co-treat's important. And so we're certainly focused on that as well as prophylaxis. After that, we do have a drug with a second mechanism of action for smallpox. The US government has always had a goal to have 2 drugs, and we're collaborating with NIH on advancing that drug in the preclinical stages. And then we also think we have a great platform. We're in a unique position. We are at the intersection of public sector work, government contracting, and pharmaceutical. That's a pretty small universe of companies. And one of the things we've learned in COVID is governments want access to pharmaceuticals in new ways through new partnerships. And we think there are opportunities for us to add additional programs and products to our platform to efficiently either collaborate with people to bring them to market or continue to bring them to market ourselves. So we have a great track record in working with governments, and we look forward to building on that.
How much are you involved in horizon scanning? Because there are always new things coming, that are appearing, emerging infectious diseases. What are you doing in that sense so that, you're aware of the needs for the next decade, say?
Yeah, and so we absolutely, both our science team and our business development team, spend a lot of time thinking about pandemics, emerging infectious disease. We sit on panels that WHO has in the area. Some of our scientists, like our chief scientific officer, sit on study sections at NIH, and we continue to monitor really the government public sector area where drugs are being identified and developed. Because as I said, we think we've actually navigated the full development from discovery through commercial launch. And so we have a lot of opportunities to help out in that space. And I will say, as a member of the public health community, I was at NIH previously. I've collaborated with CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. We like to stay close because we do recognize we partner with the US government and have a role in public health, and that's part of our mission and the way we see a realization of our goals. So we certainly stay active and look for both commercial opportunities and ways to collaborate.
So this has been a year of enormous momentum for you. What should investors be looking out for in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so last year was a momentous year for us. We started to resupply the US government stockpile and had substantial sales of product and deliveries to the US government for that. And we're looking forward over the next 4 years to having over 400 million in contract options or orders that will come in with the US government. And as I mentioned, about 45 million with Canada. So we're just at the beginning of the recognition that stockpiling is a critical aspect of this. And so through our partnership with Meridian, we're looking forward to more international sales. We're looking forward to our European and Health Canada filing reviews to get that broader indication to help us address what are sporadic monkeypox cases, but also make sure people are prepared in case that has outbreaks. And we will advance our post-exposure prophylaxis program by initiating the clinical studies this year that support what ultimately will be a need to increase the stockpile. So as I said, right now, the concept is you would treat people with our drug that were actually lesional or had the poxes, the lesions that occur in smallpox, but we know it's going to be used prophylactically. And so that will require more product. We're working with the US government as they contemplate how much really is necessary to be in the stockpile. So we'll focus on that as well.
And how much do you work with organizations like the WHO to ensure a global stockpile? Because again, one of the things that we've become acutely aware of in COVID is that until all of us are safe, none of us are safe from infectious disease.
I couldn't agree more with you, Vivienne. We do work with WHO, our chief scientific officers, on a working group there around smallpox, and we certainly believe they recognize the need not only for smallpox preparedness, but for monkeypox, and there are still cases of cowpox that pop up in Europe, and so we are very closely involved in working with WHO, and we agree with you that we need to have product available broadly. And historically, the way WHO has done that is they have donated stockpiles. So, for example, in the smallpox vaccine, there are countries that have pledged smallpox vaccine that they keep in their own borders, but in the event of an outbreak, they've said they would allocate a certain percent to a WHO use. I think that's woefully inadequate, the amounts that are there. I'm hopeful COVID will help us understand that we need to have broader stockpiles for these things. And we're certainly a big proponent of that, and hope WHO continues on that path. And we certainly will work with them on TPOXX.
A final question. What about different formulations and kind of label expansion? Where are you going in that particular field?
Absolutely. So our current approved drug is an oral capsule twice daily for 14 days. We have an intravenous formulation. There would likely be people that would be too sick or unable to swallow a capsule. So we have an intravenous formulation that we'll be filing with the US FDA this year. And currently our label is for 13 kilograms and above because they can take one capsule in its entirety or the contents. And we're working on a pediatric formulation, which is also supported by the US government. So it would be a powder for reconstitution allowed to be used down in lower weights and age groups. So the goal ultimately in preparedness, and I must commend the US government in being careful to not forget pediatrics, not to forget all populations. And so we're certainly working on that. And as I mentioned, in Europe and Canada, we've already filed for a broader orthopoxviruses indication, and we'll loop back with the US FDA on that as well.
Well, personally, I'm delighted that you've had the momentum that you've had. I mean, all for the wrong reasons, COVID coming into our life. But actually, this is extraordinarily important work. And public health is very often forgotten. But actually, as we've learned over the last year, public health is the thing that keeps us all safe. So I'm delighted to have been able to talk to you, and good luck with this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank again our team that during the pandemic last year was able to get our deliveries out to those public health experts. There's a lot of people working on public health broadly in industry and government and academia. And that really is the bright spot, I think, of the last year, of so many great things done by so many people. And I can't thank my team enough for helping us execute on that. So thank you very much for your time today.